It'd be easy to become confused these days as to how humanism and Christianity relate to one another. I feel like calling out, friend or foe? Who's coming? Who is that out there? What do you mean by humanism? Humanism is not to be confused with humanitarianism or being humane. On the other hand, humanism should not be confused with the humanities. The humanities. Christians are not in any sense opposed to the humanities. In fact, as I've said, some of the leading teachers in the humanities have been Christians. Well, some more distinctions. In real sense, if you catch on to these distinctions, you can get to the heart of what I want to tell you today. It's just because of the ambiguities or the equivocations in the discussions of so many people that when Christians are said to oppose humanism, people can carry off such a persuasive argument against Christianity, saying, how could anybody be against the liberal arts or be against being compassionate or against social reform? Well, that's not humanism. What is the humanist spirit? What is that attitude already at work back in Renaissance humanism, but now followed for its own sake in the 20th century? In a word, it's the attitude of autonomy. Autonomy from God. The autonomous man is a law to himself. And that law to himself, of course, is easy to see in like ethics, where a person decides on his own what the standards of right and wrong will be. But autonomy also comes to play in epistemology, the theory of knowledge, where man determines for himself what the standards of truth will be, determines for himself what he will bow to and what he will believe. And so you have the idea of the self-sufficient, scholarly, rational, independent, autonomous man. That's the humanist spirit. Humanism looks at man, says there's something with value. There's something that's dignified, and that will be taken as the standard. That will be the benchmark for determining right and wrong, true and false. He will be the measure, or she will be the measure of all things. Ruhn's Dictionary of Philosophy, and I quote, humanism is any view in which the welfare and happiness of mankind in this life is primary and relies on the methods of reason, science, and democracy for the solution of human problems. That is very helpful. You see, there are plenty of human problems. Christians and humanists would both say that. How do we solve them? What method do we use? Well, reason, meaning here not reason that's subordinate to the Word of God, but human reason, self-sufficient reason. Reason, science, and in the social sphere, democracy will bring about a solution to all human problems. Let me give you another illustration here. Anthony Flews' Dictionary of Philosophy, and I quote, in this century, the label, humanism, has been appropriated by those who reject all religious beliefs, insisting that we should be exclusively concerned with human welfare in this, allegedly, the only world. Who is a humanist? Who has the attitude of humanism? What is the self-conscious philosophy of humanism? The rejection of supernatural beliefs and supernatural interest, the rejection of religious intrusion into the autonomy of man's thinking and ethic, putting all those things aside and insisting we should concern ourselves exclusively with human welfare in this world alone. And then one more. Peter Angelus's recent Dictionary of Philosophy defines philosophical humanism in this way, and I quote, a philosophy that A, regards the rational individual as the highest value. Philosophers have a terrific way of being short-sighted. I mean, all the while sounding sophisticated and educated. I noticed this. I was a Christian when I did my PhD work in epistemology at SC, and I respect the intellect and the training of my professors, but those who were the most antagonistic to religion in general and Christianity in particular also seemed to me to make the greatest faith commitments of all. They would say this sort of thing. A philosophy that regards the rational individual as the highest value. Well, for crying out loud. I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to see if that's the highest value, then human history is pretty much down the garbage bin, isn't it? That's the best you can do? That's the highest value? Now look at the human achievement, right? Yes, we've gotten to the moon, but we've also, found a way of destroying 50,000 people at the drop of one bomb. Isn't that terrific? What a human achievement. The rational individual who uses his abilities for what? Getting himself ahead. The rational individual is the highest value. And where do we find our values? We go to the rational individual to find our values. He's the source of our values, which is to say that if you let human beings be the source of ethical standards, you know what they'll finally come up with? Themselves. Well, they'll end up with a mess. That's the consequences. But isn't it amazing that when you turn over the authority to make moral decisions to an individual, he makes the standard himself? I can't help but think here of Hegel, of course, who had this grand philosophy of history, which, if I'm not careful, I'll take the rest of your lunch hour talking about. Hegel was a dialectician of history. He believed that history moved inexorably in a dialectical fashion. There was a thesis. There would be a type of culture in existence that would create by rebellion its own antithesis, that which was over against it, and then history would be moved along because at a higher level there would be a resolution or a synthesis of the thesis and the antithesis. But that synthesis would then become a way of life that created its own rebellious antithesis, and it would be resolved at a higher level. And so this, you see, is what causes history to go ahead. Thesis, antithesis, resolution. Resolution creating another antithesis, resolution, and on and on and on. And so somebody says, well, where does it all end? Hegel had an answer. Hegel said the whole dialect of history ended in the Prussian state in which Hegel was living. These people come up with grand designs philosophically, and they always end up they're always king of the mountain when we get done. You know, talk about selfishness. It's, you know, the Bible puts it in more theological language, but philosophically, I can tell you, the nature of sin is demonstrated in the philosophers continually. If you let man be the source of value, he will turn around and make himself the standard. Since I'm the source of values, I am going to be the value. I will make myself king of the mountain. So this is humanism, we're being told. And then C, continue the quote, is dedicated to fostering the individual's creative and moral development in a meaningful and rational way without reference to concepts of the supernatural. Without reference to any supernatural. The only meaningful and rational way to develop human potential is to do away with anything that involves supernatural intrusion into our lives and thinking. So what is humanism? Who goes there? Is this friend or foe out here, this humanism we're talking about? Well, since I haven't stated my conclusion yet, nobody can see exactly where I'm going to end up. I'll continue for a minute. I brought with me a couple of interesting illustrations here of what humanism is. This is a document that was published by the American Humanist Association, which was founded in the 1940s, and it's a promotional piece. It's a pamphlet that I have Xeroxed in which they are pushing humanism. And as you can see, it says, what is humanism? So again, I'm not making this up. They speak for themselves. Humanism is the belief that man shapes his own destiny. It is a constructive philosophy, a non-theistic religion, a way of life. There's no question about it. Humanism is a religion, not a supernatural one. It's a naturalistic religion. Religion because it has an ultimate commitment, because it specifies man's place in the universe and how man should live. It talks about the origin of man and his destiny. It does all the things that traditional religions do, but it does it without any appeal to a supernatural deity. Humanism is the belief that man shapes his own destiny. It is a constructive philosophy, a non-theistic religion, a way of life. The humanist relies upon himself and his fellow man rather than upon any supernatural power. Close your eyes to history, you know, when you say that sort of thing. Relies upon himself and on his fellow man. He endeavors to become more tolerant and compassionate. And now we quote Julian Huxley. I use the word humanist to mean someone who believes that man is just as much a natural phenomenon as an animal or plant, that his body, mind, and soul, mind and soul, natural ingredients, part of evolution, right? First you have some kind of organism that doesn't have a mind, and then it somehow develops a mind. And then, of course, Christians are ridiculed for believing in creation out of nothing. Well, here we have evolution out of nothing. Non-mind becomes mind. But I depart from the text. I use the word humanist to mean someone who believes that man is just as much a natural phenomenon as an animal or plant, that his body, mind, and soul were not supernaturally created, but are products of evolution, and that he is not under the control or guidance of any supernatural being or beings, but has to rely on himself and his own powers. What is humanism? Who goes there? I'll tell you now in a word. Humanism is a religious philosophy that is opposed to everything that Christianity stands for. So anyway, humanism is a religion, and it's the religion of the Garden of Eden. Many humanists would probably still be a bit offended by calling this a religion, because for them religion means supernatural. But in the sense we talked about it this afternoon, religion doesn't have to be supernatural. You can have a naturalistic religion too. Moreover, not everybody who is a humanist self-consciously sets out to develop a philosophy or a religion of life at all. The humanist spirit can be accepted by default, can be followed by default. It can be caught without reflecting on it. No, sometimes it just gets caught. It's in the air. And so is the humanist spirit. It's in the air these days. It is, if you will, the zeitgeist. It's the spirit of our age. The spirit of our age says that what counts is human interest. Man will be the source of value. He will determine his own destiny. He will create a utopia in his own strength. And right and wrong will be determined just as truth and falsity will be decided based on human standards, human research, human authority. Let me conclude. There are two religions, more than that really, but two religions that are really warring in our culture these days. Humanism as a natural religion, and Christianity as a supernatural word from God centering on Jesus Christ. They are not friends, even though there has in the past been Christian humanists, because the spirit of humanism is the spirit of Eve and Adam in the garden that says, we'll be a law to ourselves, the spirit of autonomy. And that spirit of autonomy is not only at war with God, it's at war with man. Humanism, if you really trace out its implications, if you look at the results in culture, what it would mean if we were principled and consistent with respect to education, what it means about ethics and our own feeling of human dignity and why we respect one another, humanism turns out to be anti-humanistic. Christianity alone deserves the title humanism because Christianity alone can preserve all that's valuable about human nature. Would he really want a worldview in which all the implications of humanism or secularism came out? Here's one of the implications. I mean, there are things that we take for granted. I parked my car today, I walked across campus. When I walked across campus, I did not expect anybody to come up and attack me, to grab my briefcase, and I'm assuming nobody has stolen my car. We'll find out about that. And I see, if I were a humanist, what I'd have to say is, the reason why we don't do this is because I have freedom only to the extent that I don't violate the freedom of others. And that sounds very good. That's a great answer, right? No, it's not a great answer. Why should I respect the freedom of others? You see, the humanist always expects me to act like a Christian when I debate his philosophy, to grant him so much space, and then he just varies on a few of the particulars. But I want to say, no, forget this. You know what human nature is? Human nature is slime oozing out of the slime. That's what we are. We are only at the head of the pack in evolution. And as far as I'm concerned, we have no more right than the trees or the sky or the birds or, elephants for that matter, to, claim the earth as our own. And consequently, we've got to stop polluting the atmosphere. We've got to stop using modern conveniences. We've got to stop pretending the laws of logic are absolute or that human dignity should be respected. We're giving up everything that's precious to human nature when we become humanist.